Dun 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 dun. And if you haven't seen that movie, you are missing one of the funniest movies ever. So buy Graptar's Hammer, you need to go watch it. We are ready to do a review for exam 2. And I know it's scary, but never give up, never surrender. Now there's a couple of questions students commonly have. First off, is there error? You don't know, which is only funny if you get the movie quote. Second question, will there be questions from exam 1 on this exam? And the answer is yes, there will, but they'll be in a different form. Exam 1 might ask, is this categorical or numerical? I don't need to ask it in that way now. I'll just give you a scenario and you have to figure out, is this a test for means or proportions? And that's the same thing as categorical numerical. If you struggle to understand probability, then you're going to struggle with how to do the wording for a confidence interval. If you have a hard time with getting the applet to give you probabilities, you're going to never get those p-values. So everything from exam 1 was needed because we're going to use it for exam 2. So if there's something on exam 1 you don't know how to do, don't stress out. Just go for the eyes. It doesn't have any eyes. Can you construct a lathe? No, of course not. So what you're going to do is you're going to go back to exam 1 and make sure you review the stuff that you missed so that you understand it well enough for exam 2. Third question is, what's my name? I don't have a name. I'm going to die. Ah!
Daddy, aren't you supposed to be reviewing the
Yeah, I know.
exams?
I could do quotes all day. Allie's right. Let's go back to review. First thing, we've done a z-test for mu, and you should be comfortable with how to do a hypothesis test. And along with doing a hypothesis test, we also talked about a confidence interval for that scenario. So far, 2 possible questions that could be on the exam, and you should be comfortable with how to form confidence intervals and how to talk about them. And then we expanded this list to include some t-tests, and you should be comfortable with the difference between z and t. How do you know whether you have sigma or s? With S, you'll need that t-test. And then we talked about matched pairs. There is no such test called matched pairs. But there is something called matched pairs. And you should be able to recognize how are they matched, specifically by pair. These 2 numbers have to be together, and so we can take the difference of them specifically. Are they before and after? Are they twins? Were they born in the same town? Something to make them matched. And if it's not matched, the independent test. You should be comfortable with the equation, how would that S1 squared over N1 plus S2 squared over N2, how that's the standard errors squared into variances so they can be added back to square rooted. You should be comfortable with all these things, along with the confidence interval for each of them. And I hope you see the pattern so it doesn't feel like there's 12 different types of questions, but really one type of question, forwards and backwards, and then changing depending on the scenario. I hope you go back and watch the video that has the map or the grid, whichever one works for you, so that you can see how these all interrelate and how to figure out which one you're on. Not only are there means, but also proportions. 1 proportion or 2 proportion. The confidence interval is actually slightly different than the original equation, and you should know when that difference comes into play and what the difference is. And this might seem like it's enough test questions, but no, there's going to be more test questions. Why? Because I have one job on this ship, and I'm darn well going to do it.
Stick to the review.
Okay. So, speaking of the hypothesis test, there's all 7 steps, and you should be comfortable with the definition of confidence. That's the one where you have those 7 or 8 or 12 statements, and you've got to pick which ones are true and false. Everybody hates those. Yeah, I know. They're also important to make sure you understand the correct wording for confidence intervals. Type 1 and type 2 errors, usually that's done so that you can pick an alpha, okay, or power and confidence are on the same lines. Definition of p-value, what does it really mean? If the p-value is 0.08, that's 8% of what? Right now, half the people that watch this video are all stressed because they don't know. Sample size calculations, you should be able to say if I want this kind of margin of error, how large does my sample need to be? Remember to always round up. And then there's tricky things like a z-score that's so massively huge that you worry you've done it wrong, or a p-value that's bigger than 0.5, so you assume you needed the other tail. No, be very careful. P-values can be bigger than 0.05. It's really rare. Or a z-score between 0 and 1. These are the same tricks we saw in the last exam. When a z-score is in that range, students think this is the p-value, and they get confused. So I'm testing, can you keep it straight? And then, of course, the last thing we want to do is, since the superprotector got accelerated coming out of the black hole and it like nailed the atmosphere of Mach 15, which, is pretty unstable, obviously. So we're going to help Laredo guide it in on the Vox ultra frequency carrier and use Roman candles for visual confirmation.
Dad,